Vivian thought she was surprising her husband with his favorite bourbon, until she overheard him plotting her death to cash in on her life insurance and date her sister. Shocked and heartbroken, she vanished without a trace, fleeing to Mallorca to rebuild her life in secret. But this isn't just a story of escape, it's one of calculated revenge, hidden files, and the slow unraveling of a man who thought he'd won. As Vivian transforms from betrayed wife to quiet warrior, the truth behind their marriage is exposed. Want to know how it all ends? Watch until the very last second. His friend laughed. Or finally date her sister guilt-free. I left the bourbon. By morning I was in Mallorca. 2 weeks later, his sister called crying. The bourbon bottle felt heavy in my hands as I stood before the cabin door. My heartbeat quickened with anticipation after traveling 12 hours to surprise Ethan. Then I heard his voice through the weathered wood. Words that froze the smile on my face and shattered my world into 1,000 jagged pieces. If she vanished, that insurance money could clear my debt. My husband's voice was casual, almost thoughtful, as if discussing the weather. A burst of laughter followed, then his friend's voice, or finally date her sister guilt-free. More laughter. My fingers tightened around the bottle of Carrington Reserve. His favorite bourbon that I'd carefully wrapped with a red ribbon. The gift I'd carried across 2 countries through endless delays, suddenly felt like a prop in someone else's play. I grew up surrounded by wealth. My father built his property empire from nothing, ensuring both my sister Lauren and I would never want for anything. When I met Ethan at a charity fundraiser 3 years ago, he seemed refreshingly uninterested in my family's fortune. He was charming, ambitious, enrolled at Westbridge School of Business, and full of dreams. I fell hard and fast. Ethan just needs time to establish himself. I explained to my father when he questioned why my new husband hadn't signed the prenup. He's sensitive about the income gap. I trust him. My father's concerned frown should have been my first warning. Vivian, love shouldn't require financial sacrifice. Remember that. I didn't listen. Instead, I funded Ethan's consulting startup when traditional investors declined. I paid off his business school loans for our first anniversary. I bought the estate he wanted in the neighborhood he chose. Each time he cited a setback, I wrote another check, believing in the partnership I thought we were building. My sister tried warning me in her gentle way. He asks about our family trusts a lot. Vivi, it's odd. I dismissed her concern as overprotectiveness. He's just trying to understand our world, I insisted. Standing outside that cabin door, all those warnings crashed down on me at once. Yesterday had been normal. A video call with Ethan, where he talked about the trip, how the guys were playing poker and hiking. He'd mentioned missing me. I'd smiled, already knowing I would surprise him, having secretly booked my flight weeks ago. The decision came during one of many lonely evenings in our oversized house. 2 years of supporting his dreams while mine gathered dust. 2 years of accepting excuses for missing my family dinners. 2 years of watching how his eyes gleamed when he spoke of Lauren's career. Babe, I can't make it this weekend. Guys only. No wives allowed, he'd said last week, kissing my forehead. You understand? I did understand. I understood his need for space. What I didn't understand was why I always had to be the understanding one. So I decided just once to do something spontaneous. To see his face light up when I walked in unannounced, and reminded him why we fell in love. The journey had been a disaster. Delays, missed connections, and storms. First, a mechanical issue grounded us for 2 hours in Frankfurt. Then bad weather diverted us to Marseille. The final flight was delayed 3 more hours due to crew shortages. I sat in hard chairs checking my watch, clutching my carry-on with the $200 bottle of bourbon I'd ordered. A woman at the last gate noticed my nerves. Someone special waiting. My husband, I replied, smiling despite the exhaustion. He has no idea I'm coming. Those are the best surprises, she said, patting my hand. I clung to the image of Ethan's shocked smile, imagining him telling his friends, "See what an incredible wife I have." I stood frozen outside cabin number 8. The words still echoed. How much is the policy for again? Ethan's friend asked. 2 million. Took some convincing to get her to sign. I told her it was for our future kids. I pressed my hand to my mouth to muffle a gasp. My legs trembled, but held. Dude, that's cold, another voice said, half laughing. Cold? It's strategic, Ethan replied. Her father's worth 9 figures. Her sister's single and more fun. Vivian's sweet but dull, always playing the good daughter. Something in me bent for years, finally snapped. A memory surfaced, Ethan urging skydiving, rock climbing, scuba diving, always suggesting risks. I thought he was adventurous. Now I knew better. He was laying groundwork for accidents. The bourbon slipped. I set it down beside the door, quietly peeling off the gift tag with my name. My wedding ring caught the porch light, its sparkle suddenly gaudy and false. Just like our marriage, I stepped back, my suitcase abandoned beside the bourbon. Through the cabin window I saw them, Ethan and his friends playing cards, laughing over beers. My husband smiling, completely at ease discussing my death. This man who kissed me goodbye at the airport 3 days ago. This man who swore to love me through anything. This man with access to every account I own. My wedding ring burned on my skin. I twisted it off as I walked back to my rental car. My mind raced through all the signs I'd ignored. The questions about my life insurance. The subtle distancing from my friends and family. The accidental meetings with my sister. As I slid into the driver's seat, I placed my wedding ring in the cup holder. A small glittering testament to a marriage built on lies. For a brief moment I considered confronting him. I imagined the satisfaction of seeing his face when he realized he'd been caught. But self-preservation won out. If he was willing to contemplate my death for money, what else might he do when cornered? I started the engine and pulled away from the cabin that held the ruins of my marriage, tears finally breaking free. But beneath the devastation, something else was forming, a cold, clear determination. By morning I would be in Mallorca. By the time Ethan returned home, I would be officially missing. Let him sweat, let him wonder, let him face those debt collectors alone. I may have been raised with wealth and privilege. But my father also taught me something Ethan had clearly forgotten. Never underestimate a woman with resources, and a reason for revenge. My hands didn't shake as I sat in my rental car in the dimly lit parking lot a mile from the cabin. That surprised me. The numbness had settled in, wrapping around me like a protective shield. I pulled out my phone and opened the airline app. One-way ticket. Furthest place I could think of on short notice. Mallorca. Confirmation email arrived seconds later. No hesitation, no second thought. I drove to the nearest 24-hour pharmacy, purchased a prepaid phone, and activated it in the parking lot. Then I called my assistant. Emily, I need you to do something for me. No questions asked. Of course, Miss Hartley. Is everything all right? I'm taking an extended personal trip. Emergency. I need you to cancel all my appointments for the next month. If anyone asks, including Ethan, you haven't heard from me since yesterday. Pause. Should I be worried about you? No, I said, surprised by how calm I sounded. I just need time. I'll contact you when I can. I hung up and removed the battery from my regular phone. Ethan could track that one. The rental car GPS could be tracked too. I returned it to the airport and took a ride share to a different airport in the next region. Every decision calculated, mechanical, as if someone else was moving my body while I watched from a distance. The red-eye flight was half empty as the plane lifted into the darkness. Memories flickered through my mind like an old slideshow, recontextualizing themselves in the harsh light of tonight's revelation. Ethan commenting on Lauren's dress at the holiday gala. She's always had impeccable taste. The way his eyes linger. His suggestion that I change my will after we married. It's what responsible couples do. The hiking trip where he insisted on taking photos of me near steep ledges. Just back up a little more, love. The swimming incident last summer when I nearly drowned. He'd encouraged me to swim out farther than I was comfortable with. You're stronger than you think, he'd said. Then somehow wasn't nearby when I started struggling. His casual dismissal of my fertility concern. We have plenty of time for kids. Let's enjoy being just us for now. Was he waiting for the insurance policy to mature? The pieces assembled themselves into a horrifying mosaic. I wasn't a wife to him. I was a walking bank account with an expiration date of his choosing. The flight attendant touched my shoulder, startling me. Ma'am, would you like some water? I realized I'd been silently crying. 16 hours and 3 flights later, I emerged into the humid Mallorcan air. My hastily packed suitcase contained 3 outfits, basic toiletries, my passport, and an envelope with €5,000 in emergency cash. I'd withdrawn another $10,000 at my layover, maxing out the daily limit. My credit cards remained untouched. Those could be traced. The taxi driver didn't speak much English, which suited me fine. I showed him the name of a small inn I'd found online during my layover. Not a resort, nothing luxurious, nothing Ethan would ever think to look for me in. Porto Calablanca, he nodded, pulling away from the airport. Through the window, lush greenery and colorful villas blurred together. I was 3,000 miles from home, from the life I'd built, from the husband who had plotted my death. My wedding ring finger felt exposed, the tan lines stark against my skin. The Hotel Soleil Del Mar sat on a quiet stretch of beach. Its weathered turquoise paint faded from sun and salt. The lobby consisted of a small front desk and a few rattan chairs. A ceiling fan turned lazily overhead. The older woman at the desk smiled warmly. Reservation? No. I hesitated. Do you have any rooms available? For a few weeks. She assessed me disheveled, exhausted, eyes swollen from silent tears. Whatever she saw made her nod gently. We have a room with ocean view. Very peaceful. When she pushed the registration card toward me, I hesitated only briefly before writing Vivian Hartley, my maiden name. A name I hadn't used in 2 years. A name that felt both foreign and like coming home. Just you, Senora Hartley. Yes, just me. On vacation. I paused, unsure how to explain, then started over. Something in her eyes softened with understanding. She handed me a key, an actual metal key, not a key card. Room 8. Up the stairs, end of the walkway. Very private. The irony of another room 8 wasn't lost on me. I'd stood outside one cabin door and lost everything. Now I was entering another room 8, to begin again. The room was simple, white walls, tile floor, a queen bed with a faded blue coverlet, and double doors that opened onto a small balcony overlooking the Mediterranean. The bathroom had a shower with inconsistent water pressure, no air conditioning, just a ceiling fan. Nothing like the luxury resorts Ethan and I used to frequent. It was perfect. I dropped my suitcase and walked to the balcony. The sun was setting, casting warm streaks of orange and pink across the sky. Waves lapped rhythmically against the shore. For the first time since hearing those devastating words, I allowed myself a real breath. Night fell quickly in Mallorca. I lay on the unfamiliar bed in the darkness, listening to the ocean and the strange sounds of island nightlife. Reality started to pierce the protective fog I'd been wrapped in. My chest tightened, my breathing turned shallow, everything I'd buried deep surged to the surface. I curled into myself, sobs racking my body, muffled by the hotel pillow I clutched to my face. I cried for the woman who had loved so blindly, for the future I believed in, for the betrayal so sharp I couldn't locate where it ended. He wanted me dead. I whispered it into the dark, the truth cutting like glass. The tears didn't stop until there were no more left. Just a hollow ache where everything used to be. I dragged myself into the bathroom, splashed water on my face, and stared into the cloudy mirror. The woman staring back wasn't the same. Shadows under her eyes. A new hardness at her mouth. I didn't know her yet, but maybe I needed to. I returned to the bed and lay still as the hours crawled by. The ceiling fan spun lazily, casting moving shadows along the walls. Somewhere nearby, faint music played and faded. The ocean kept whispering outside. As dawn crept through the sheer curtains, I slipped onto the balcony and watched the sun stretch across the golden water. Birds called overhead from the trees. The world moved forward as if nothing had changed. As if my life hadn't just fallen apart. I had left behind everything. My house, my wardrobe, my identity as Ethan's wife. All I had now was myself. And for the first time in years, I wondered if that might actually be enough. A knock startled me. I opened the door to find Lucille Navarro, the hotel's owner, standing with a tray, coffee, sliced fruit, and toast. On the house, she said, her tone gentle. First day is always the hardest. As she turned to leave, I found my voice. How did you know? She gave me a knowing smile. You're not the first woman to wash up on our shore looking for a fresh start, Senora. And you won't be the last. After she left, I sipped the dark coffee and watched the beach below come alive. Locals walked dogs. A fisherman pushed his wooden boat into the waves. No one knew my name. No one expected anything from me. For the first time since hearing Ethan's voice through that cabin door, I felt something other than pain. I felt possibility. That word, possibility, became a quiet mantra over the next few days. I whispered it each morning while watching the sunrise from my balcony, coffee in hand, a ritual Lucille had established without asking. She appeared daily with the same warm tray and quiet compassion. On the third day, when I offered money, she waved it off. First you heal, she said firmly, then we talk business. That afternoon she knocked again. Come walk with me. I hesitated, then followed her barefoot down to the beach. Her sandaled steps left perfect imprints in the damp sand. "My husband left me for my cousin 20 years ago," she said without preamble. "It nearly destroyed me. Instead I bought this place. Sometimes the best revenge isn't justice. It's joy." I stopped walking. "How did you know?" Lucille smiled softly. "Your eyes." The look of a woman betrayed is unmistakable. Different men, same pain. She gestured toward the endless horizon. "This island has a way of restoring the broken." That night I sat on the balcony and watched the world from above. Children played near the surf. Couples wandered hand in hand. Families laughed over meals at beach cafes. And I felt it again, that strange, quiet isolation. I had been hiding in my room for days, licking wounds no one could see. But what was I hiding from? Ethan didn't know where I was. No one did. The next morning I stepped out before Lucille arrived with breakfast. The sand was cool beneath my feet. I walked the shoreline, watching the sky shift from navy to pink to blue. A local vendor arranged fruit in neat piles under a red canopy. "Buenos dias," he called, slicing a ripe mango and handing me a piece. The sweetness exploded on my tongue, a reminder that pleasure still existed. That became another ritual. Morning walks, fresh fruit, quiet nods exchanged with people who asked nothing of me. Each day I walked farther from Hotel Soleil del Mar, and each day the tightness in my chest eased, just a little. A week into my quiet exile, I passed a small salon nestled between a souvenir shop and a family-run cafe. Through the window I caught my reflection. Long hair, neat ponytail. My so-called crown, as Ethan had called it. He hated when I mentioned cutting it. Said it was what made me elegant. Before I could think twice I stepped into the salon. The stylist, a young woman with electric blue streaks in her dark bob, looked up and smiled. "Can I help you?" "I want it all gone," I said, pulling the tie from my hair and letting it fall. "Sure. Something different?" "Not different," I replied. "Just, not the old me." She studied me a beat, then nodded. "I know exactly what you need." I closed my eyes as she began. The soft snipping of scissors was oddly comforting. When she finally spun the chair toward the mirror I blinked. The woman looking back was someone new. The layered cut framed my face, revealing cheekbones I'd forgotten. I looked unburdened. "You look beautiful," the stylist said, satisfaction in her voice. I touched the ends of my newly cropped hair. "Yes," I agreed. "It is." From the salon I wandered into a small boutique that sold locally made clothes. I bought a pair of flowing linen pants, a few colorful cotton tops and sandals with thick soles. Nothing like the luxury brands that once filled my wardrobe back in France. I tossed the rest of what I'd packed, designer pieces that suddenly felt like a costume, into the donation bin outside the shop. The woman who had worn silk blouses and tailored suits, who had coordinated handbags to earrings, felt like a character I no longer played. That evening Lucille raised a single eyebrow when she saw me in the courtyard. "Now you look like you belong here." "I'm starting to feel like I do," I admitted, surprising us both. 2 days later, during a walk down a quiet stone alleyway just off the harbor, I stumbled upon a small art gallery tucked between a wine bar and a leather shop. Inside, the walls were a riot of color, landscapes of Casablanca and its surroundings, wild brushstrokes that captured the soul of the island rather than its literal beauty. In the corner sat an elderly man with silver hair and sun-spotted skin, sketching in a worn notebook. "You like art?" he asked in accented English, eyes not leaving the page. "I used to paint," I said. "Years ago, before Ethan. Before I gave up all the parts of myself that didn't fit the wife he wanted." He nodded and handed me a pencil and his sketchbook. "Show me." I hesitated, then slowly sat beside him. My first lines were hesitant, awkward, but then my hand remembered. The coastlines came back, the palms, the flicker of light on water. I lost track of time. When I finally looked up, he smiled. "You have talent. I am Andres. Come back tomorrow. I'll teach you more." I did. Day after day, the Rivera studio became my refuge. Andres introduced me to other local artists, pushed me to try different mediums. I started with charcoal, moved to watercolor, then acrylics. Every brushstroke opened a door I'd thought permanently shut. "Your work has sadness," Andres said quietly one day, "but also strength. That's what makes it worth something. Art should tell the truth." 3 weeks into my stay, I finally logged into my email on the hotel's shared computer. Over 200 messages waited. Frantic ones from Ethan, more composed ones from friends. A few from Lauren, wondering why I hadn't responded to her texts. The most recent was a copy of a report Ethan had filed with the police formally reporting me as a missing person. He described me as emotionally unstable, fragile, possibly suicidal. My fingers trembled as I logged into the joint account where my trust fund allowance was deposited each month. The balance zero. 2 days after I'd vanished, every cent had been transferred to an account I didn't recognize. I checked my separate personal account, the one Ethan didn't know about. It was untouched. I leaned back staring at the screen. He was already collecting. Assuming I was dead, or as good as, the insurance policy might not have paid yet, but he'd grabbed whatever he could get his hands on. That confirmation, the final nail, should have broken me. Instead, it solidified something inside. That evening I sat on the balcony, a glass of local wine in hand. Lucille joined me, no words, just quiet understanding. The waves hummed below. After a few minutes she spoke. "You look different tonight." "I've made a decision," I said simply. She nodded, raised her glass. "To phoenixes, rising from ashes." I clinked mine gently against hers. The woman who had stumbled into room 8 at Sola del Mar was gone. In her place sat someone far more dangerous to Ethan than he could ever imagine. The plan wasn't fully formed yet, but it was coming together. Over the next few days, I mapped it out. Notes, timelines, contingencies. I reached out to my attorney, Richard Hale, through an encrypted email system. I didn't trust anything else. Every step was deliberate, strategic. I'd grown up watching my father dismantle empires with nothing but spreadsheets and a phone call. This time the empire I'd dismantle would be Ethan's. That afternoon I was dozing in a hammock outside my balcony, rocked by the sound of waves, when a ringtone I didn't recognize jolted me awake. For a moment I couldn't place it. Then I remembered. The prepaid phone I'd bought at the pharmacy, the one I'd given to just one person. I sat up, fumbling for the device. My pulse quickened. "Hello? Miss Hartley," came Emily's voice, quiet and strained. "I'm so sorry to disturb you, but there's someone who needs to speak with you. It's important." Before I could respond there was rustling. Then a new voice came on the line, shaky, tear-filled but instantly recognizable. "Vivian, oh my God, you're alive. Thank God." I didn't know who else to call. Your assistant wouldn't tell me anything, but I begged her. Rachel Blackwood, Ethan's sister, my sister-in-law, but more than that, once she'd been my friend, long before she became my family. "How did you get this number?" I asked, already sitting upright. "I've been calling everyone trying to find you," Ethan said. "He said you disappeared, that you might have," her voice cracked, "hurt yourself." I didn't answer the accusation, because deep down she wasn't asking. She was hoping. "Rachel," I said, trying to keep calm, "slow down. What's going on?" She exhaled shakily. "There are men at Ethan's house. Our house. Dangerous men." A pit formed in my stomach. "What kind of men?" "The kind who break things," she whispered. "Fingers, face." "They said he has 3 days to pay what he owes, or they'll make an example of him. And they know about me, about my house. They said if he runs they'll take mine instead." I closed my eyes. I remembered the little house she bought with her teaching salary, the soft blue shutters she painted herself, the rose bushes she'd planted in the front garden. It was her world, her peace. "How much does he owe?" I asked, already bracing. 300,000, she whispered. "Gambling debts." My stomach turned. "I had no idea it was this bad," she said. "Vivian, none of us did. But I did." Now it all made sense. The desperate push for my insurance money. The probing questions about the trust fund. The endless business setbacks that were never really about business. "When did it start?" "I don't know," she replied. "He always liked betting on games. But this," the men said, "it's been going on over a year. High-stakes poker, sports betting, underground casinos. He kept asking to borrow against my house 2 months ago. I thought he was being irresponsible. Now I know." I remembered the supposed client dinners. The weekends he said he was networking. The frantic phone calls behind closed doors. Every lie, every omission. "Where is he now?" I asked. "At his place," she said. "Drinking. He's a mess." "Vivian, you leaving. It broke him. The police suspect him in your disappearance. Did you know that?" I didn't speak. And now these men. I'm scared for him. The irony nearly broke me. The man who'd fantasized about my death for a payout was now being investigated for possibly causing it. "Why are you calling me, Rach?" I asked, keeping my voice steady though my hands were trembling. What do you want from me? She hesitated. I thought if you came back, told the police you just needed time away. Maybe with your family's connections. The money. You want me to pay his gambling debts? It wasn't a question. I know it's asking a lot, she said, voice cracking. But they'll hurt him, Vivian. Maybe worse. And I'll lose my home. Everything I've built. Always the protector. Always making excuses. Always cleaning up the messes he made. Once I admired that in her. Now I only felt a dull ache. Does he know you're calling me? No, she whispered. He thinks you're... She couldn't finish the sentence. That her brother hoped I was dead, and she was asking me to save him from the consequences of trying to make that wish come true. I need time to think, I said at last. I'll call you back, on this number. Before she could respond, I ended the call, then immediately dialed Emily. How did she get to you? I asked. She showed up at the office, Emily replied, crying, saying it was life or death. I'm sorry. It's okay, I interrupted. Just no one else, Emily. Not even if they're in tears. After I hung up, I slipped on my sandals and walked to the beach, my thoughts circling like gulls in a storm. The smart choice would be to stay hidden. Let Ethan unravel. Let him face the men he'd borrowed from. Let Rachel lose the house if she had to. None of it was my responsibility. His debt, not mine. His addictions? Not mine. His danger? Not mine. But Rachel had been kind. Real. When no one else in Ethan's family had ever welcomed me, she did. When his mother had made cruel jokes about trust fund wives, it was Rachel who shut it down. When Ethan had lied, she defended me. She was his sister, but she was also once my friend. I crouched and picked up a smooth stone, hurling it into the Mediterranean. It sank without a splash. This decision wasn't about Ethan. It was about the woman I was becoming, the one who had fled the forest cabin out of fear, but who now stood at a crossroad not of survival but of integrity. And whoever I chose to be next, it had to be someone I could live with. But the woman I was becoming, stronger, clearer, more purposeful, needed to make choices she could live with. I returned to my room and called my attorney, Richard Hale. After laying out the situation, I asked a single question. Can I pay someone else's debt, without revealing my location or legal status? There was a long pause. It's possible, he said. Complicated, but possible. 2 hours and several encrypted calls later, I had my answer. I dialed Rachel's number again. I'll handle the debt, I said flatly. But there are conditions. Her breath caught. Anything. First, I said. Ethan never finds out the money came from me. As far as he knows, I'm still missing. I've arranged for records of international travel to surface. The police will stop treating this as a homicide investigation and reclassify it as a voluntary disappearance. Okay, she said quickly. Second, you get Ethan into rehab. Real rehab. Not a 3-day detox. An actual program with therapists. Accountability. Long-term care. Absolutely, she said. No hesitation. And third, I added, you sell your house and move. Somewhere he doesn't know about. Somewhere safe. There was a long silence on the other end. You think he'd hurt me? I thought of the cabin, of the smirk in his voice when he imagined my death clearing his debts, of the $5 million insurance policy forged in my name. I think a desperate man is unpredictable, and Ethan is very, very desperate right now. She was quiet for a long time, then softly, okay, I'll do it. But before we ended the call, she asked the question I dreaded. Vivian, why did you leave like that? What happened? I closed my eyes, choosing my words with care. I overheard something. Something that made me realize our marriage wasn't what I thought it was. Something unforgivable. Another pause. Longer. Was it about me? My heart skipped. What do you mean? She hesitated. Ethan, he's always had this idea. That you and I, she couldn't finish. My blood went cold. That we what? Rach, that we were supposed to be together, she whispered. That I had feelings for you. He used to say it when he drank. It's why his last girlfriend left. He kept comparing her to me. Then to you. I thought he was joking. But then he started telling people. His friend's voice from the cabin echoed in my mind. Or finally date her sister guilt-free. Not my sister. His Rachel. I said carefully. What exactly did Ethan tell you about me? The line was so silent I thought we'd been disconnected. Finally, her voice returned. Smaller now. Ashamed. He said you were unstable. That you had episodes. That you confused dreams with reality. He said you'd accused him of things he never did, that you were paranoid about the money. A cold fury settled into my bones, sharp and unrelenting. Not only had he plotted my death, but he'd spent years laying the groundwork to make sure no one would believe me if I survived it, including his own sister. I'm going to help you, I said, my voice steadier than expected. But after this debt is handled, we're going to have a longer conversation about your brother. After arranging the debt payment through Richard, I made another call to Nathan Cole, a discreet and relentless private investigator my father had used for complex corporate matters. I'd met him at a gala in Paris years ago. He'd once tracked a missing heir across 6 countries. I need everything, I told him. Financials, phone records, emails, text messages. I need to know exactly who I was married to. It's going to get ugly, he warned. Are you sure you want the full picture? I need it, I said. For closure, for protection. The next 3 days were some of the longest of my life. Outwardly, I maintained my rituals. Morning walks, art lessons with Andres, quiet meals with Lucy. But beneath the surface I was planning scenarios, timelines, outcomes. My heart didn't race anymore. The fear was gone, replaced by something far colder, clarity. On the 4th day, Nathan's first report arrived via encrypted email. I downloaded the file and took my laptop to the balcony, the sea glowing gold in the early light. I braced myself and opened it. What I found was worse than I imagined. 3 months after our wedding, Ethan had taken out a second life insurance policy in my name. I'd never signed it. The signature was a well-forged fake. The beneficiary Ethan Blackwood. The payout, $5 million. I stared at the scanned documents, my stomach roiling, and suddenly everything snapped into sharp damning focus. The skydiving trip he insisted we take. The boating excursion where he pushed me to go out alone before a storm. The photos on the edge of that cliff in Switzerland. All potential accidents. All with Ethan in the role of concerned loving husband. Witnesses would say he warned me, that I was reckless. Emotional. The next file was phone logs. Hundreds of messages between Ethan and Lauren, my sister. On the surface they were innocent. Questions about holidays. Casual remarks about my schedule. But reading between the lines, he was testing boundaries, gauging interest, flirting without consequence. Lauren's replies were brief, polite, cautious, and then they dwindled. The final message exchange, 3 weeks ago. Ethan, we need to talk privately. I have concerns about Vivian I can only share with you. Lauren, if you're worried about my sister, talk to her directly, or get help. I'm not comfortable with this. I stared at the screen, a swell of relief blooming in my chest. She hadn't encouraged him. She'd backed away. She'd seen the trap and refused to step inside. I blinked hard, grateful beyond words. Then I opened the financial report. The timeline was damning. While he cried poor, while I paid his student loans and bankrolled his consulting firm, Ethan had maintained a secret credit card I never knew existed. The statements showed designer purchases, private dinners, luxury hotels, none of them involving me. There were jewelry receipts on important dates. My birthday, our anniversary, Christmas, gifts I'd never received. I flipped to the offshore accounts, one in the Cayman Islands, opened 6 months after our wedding, funded in part by business transfers from our joint account. The total balance, $1.2 million. My money, my trust, funneled away behind my back. The final file was a draft email, never sent, found in his deleted folder. It was addressed to my father's estate attorney. Ethan was inquiring casually about the structure of my trust fund in the event of my untimely death. It was dated 2 weeks before the cabin trip. I closed the laptop and bolted to the bathroom. The nausea hit like a wave. When it passed, I collapsed onto the cool tile floor. The silence around me cracked. The weight of betrayal settled like concrete in my chest. This wasn't just greed. It was a campaign, a story he'd carefully constructed. One where I was the unstable wife, the financial liability, the tragic accident waiting to happen, and the grieving innocent husband. But he'd made one mistake. I was still alive. The statements showed purchases at luxury retailers, high-end restaurants, expensive hotels, none of which had ever included me. There were charges from jewelry boutiques, dated on my birthday, our anniversary, Christmas, gifts I'd never received, likely bought for other women, or perhaps to pay off favors related to gambling debts. The specifics didn't matter anymore. The deception did. Most damning was the offshore account, Opened 6 months after our wedding in the Cayman Islands. Regular transfers from our joint accounts. Funds I'd believed were supporting his business, his startup, his future. But they had gone instead into a hidden vault for his eventual getaway. The balance, $1.2 million. My money, my trust, stored away ready for the moment I was gone. All while Ethan told me we needed to live modestly. All while I was quietly cutting my own spending, believing we were building something together. The final document hit harder than I expected. A draft email found in his deleted folder, addressed to my father's estate attorney. In it, Ethan inquired about the exact terms of my trust fund in the event of my death, specifically whether, as my spouse, he would gain control of the assets. It was dated 3 weeks ago, just days before the cabin. I closed the laptop and stumbled into the bathroom, where I was violently ill. When the nausea faded, I slid down onto the cool tile floor, resting my back against the wall. This wasn't a one-time lapse. This wasn't a mistake. This was calculated, long-term, strategic. Ethan hadn't married me for love. He'd married me with an exit strategy, one that ended with my death. A knock at the door made me jump. I wiped my face and opened it to find Lucille standing there. Concern etched across her weathered features. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said softly. "I think I just met one," I murmured. She came inside, sat beside me on the bed, and listened without interruption as I told her everything Nathan had uncovered. With each revelation, her eyes narrowed, her fingers clenched around the fabric of her skirt. Finally "Men like him," she said quietly, "they always find someone new, someone kind, someone trusting. They vanish before the damage catches up to them." "Not this time," I said, and surprised myself with the steel in my voice. "This time, there will be consequence." That evening, I sent Nathan a new set of instructions. Everything he had, every account, every signature, every recorded call, every forged document, I asked him to organize into a clear, indisputable file. It wouldn't just be for court, it would be for exposure. I also asked him to check in on Rachel, quietly, to ensure she'd relocated, that she was following through on her promise to get Ethan into treatment. His reply came within the hour. "Rachel has moved in with a friend. Ethan doesn't know where. He's accepted the anonymous payment store. He's drinking heavily and making threats about finding you." I forwarded everything to Richard, my attorney, with a single directive: prepare for war, but wait for my signal. Then I opened a blank document and began typing. It started as a timeline: when I met Ethan, when the signs began, when they escalated. Then it became something more: a confession, a chronicle, a record of every red flag I'd ignored, every manipulation I'd excused, every danger I'd missed, until it became undeniable. If anything happened to me, this file would be my voice, my testimony, my warning. I wrote late into the night, and as I did, something sharpened. The plan had lived in fragments for days. Now it took shape. Not just a plan for justice, not just one for protection, a reckoning. Ethan had spent years weaving an elaborate fiction: his charming persona, his startup dreams, his constant martyrdom over my wealth, all while laying the foundation for my erasure. Now it was time to reveal the author behind the mask. The preparation took a full week. Every detail had to be timed, every backup had to be stored, every possible retaliation anticipated. This wasn't about revenge. This wasn't rage. It was about truth. Cold, deliberate, and undeniable. First, I protected my finance. Nathan helped transfer the remainder of my assets from the old joint accounts into secure accounts Ethan couldn't access, not even if he tried. We contacted credit card companies to dispute and flag fraudulent charges, backdated to days before my disappearance. Richard prepared an emergency injunction to freeze the offshore account the moment we triggered the plan. Next came the legal prep. I compiled every document Nathan had found: insurance fraud, identity theft, financial exploitation, forged. I laid them out in a cloud folder, organized by category, with cross-referenced timelines. It was meticulous, bulletproof. We even added a section for the psychological component: the manipulation of Rachel, the lies told to my sister, the smear campaign Ethan had started long before the world knew I was missing. I added annotations, images. The file labeled "Timeline of Deceit" sat at the top of the folder, with a final note: if you are reading this and I am no longer safe, start here. I had never been more methodical, I had never been more calm, and I had never felt more alive. Then his eyes widened in disbelief. "Vivian," he whispered, the color draining from his face like he'd seen a ghost. In a way he had. I said nothing. He stepped back instinctively, mouth parting, eyes darting to the driveway behind me as if half expecting police to be there already. "You're alive." I took a single step forward, not waiting for an invitation. "We need to talk." He moved aside wordlessly, and I walked into the house that once held our shared life. Now cold and unfamiliar, the air smelled of stale alcohol and something sour, like old food or regret. Takeout boxes littered the kitchen counter, a wine glass lay tipped on the floor, a smear of red across the tile like a warning. I turned to face him in the living room. He still hadn't spoken. "Where have you been?" he finally stammered. "You just vanished." "The police," everyone thought. "That you killed me," I finished. He blinked hard. "No, I mean of course not. Jesus, Vivian, I've been worried sick. I imagine it's hard to collect on a life insurance policy when the body doesn't show up." His mouth opened, then closed again. His throat bobbed. "What are you talking about?" "I was at the cabin, Ethan." I said it slowly, like I wanted the words to land with weight. "I heard everything." He froze. "The insurance money, the plan to clear your debts, your charming fantasies about dating your sister guilt-free." "She's not my sister," he snapped automatically, then flinched at the admission. I nodded, unsurprised. "No, she's just someone else you use." His mask cracked then, just a flicker, but enough. The charm, the faux concern, the practiced control, it all faltered beneath the weight of exposure. "You misunderstood," he said, tone shifting to soft and patronizing. "It was a joke, dark humor. You know how guys talk. A joke." I tilted my head. "Is that what the forged insurance documents were too? A joke?" He went pale. I reached into my bag and pulled out the thick manila folder I'd prepared. I laid it carefully on the coffee table like a bomb. "What is this?" "Your career's end. Your arrest warrant. Your legacy." I opened the folder, page by page, laying out the evidence. "Here's the life insurance policy you forged. The emails to my father's lawyer about the trust fund. The bank transfers to the Cayman account. All tracked. All document." He stared, frozen, the blood drained from his face. "You broke into my accounts." "No," I said sharply. "I reclaimed what was mine. Every dime you funneled out. Every lie you built this marriage on. You planned to erase me, Ethan, but you forgot the most important detail." I leaned in, voice low and cold. "I don't disappear." His hands twitched. "You can't prove any of this." "Oh, I can." I pulled out the flash drive and placed it beside the folder. "And if anything happens to me, this goes to the FBI, the insurance board, and every journalist in the city. It's already backed up in 4 locations." I stood up. "You're done." He stared at the flash drive like it was a ticking grenade. "What do you want?" he finally whispered. "A clean divorce. You walk away with nothing. No claim to my name, my family's assets, or anything tied to me. You disappear." "You can't." "I can," I said, "and I already have." A knock at the door interrupted us. Right on time, Rachel stepped into the doorway, face calm, eyes resolute. She'd lost weight, and the way she looked at her brother now was different. No more illusions, no more forgiveness. "You told her," he hissed at me. "She deserved the truth," I replied. Rachel moved beside me, holding a smaller folder of her own. "And I'm here to make sure she gets it." The 3 of us stood in the room that once served as the centerpiece of a life I thought I wanted. Now, it felt like the final stage of a long, cruel play. "I'll sign whatever you want," Ethan muttered, sinking onto the couch. "Just, make it go away." "No," I said. "You don't get to make this disappear. You get to live in it." I turned to Rachel. "Let's." As we stepped into the night, the silver charm bracelet on my wrist caught the porch light, glinting like a shield. I didn't look back. He stepped toward me again, voice lowering into that familiar silky tone that once made me feel safe. "Vivian," he murmured, his eyes softening with practiced vulnerability. "Whatever mistakes I made, I did them out of fear, out of love. We can fix this. I love you. I've always loved you." I didn't flinch. I felt nothing. Not pain, not doubt, not even rage anymore. Just clarity. "You don't get to redefine what love is," I said coolly. "And you don't get to rewrite history. Not anymore." He glanced at Rebecca, desperation blooming now, the final unraveling. "Bex, please, tell her I'm not this monster she thinks I am." Rebecca crossed her arms, gaze unyielding. "You are the monster, Ethan. You just wore a better mask than most." A silence thickened in the room. For the first time, Ethan realized it was over. Not just his marriage, not just his schemes, but the entire illusion of control he'd wrapped around us. He looked back at me. "So what happens now?" "Now," I said, You sign the divorce papers. You leave with nothing. You disappear. And if I don't, he challenged, voice hoarse. Then I give the FBI every document in that folder. The insurance fraud, the forged signatures, the embezzled funds, the offshore laundering, the attempts to manipulate 2 women in your family for personal gain. I gestured toward the door, and I let the press run the story. You'll be front-page news, and not the kind you'll recover from. I walked to the coffee table, pulled out a pen, and placed it on top of the papers. You have 5 minutes. He didn't speak, his jaw clenched, his hands trembled, but eventually he sat down, and he signed. Each page, silent, resigned. When he reached the final one, I leaned over and picked up the pen, then the papers. I returned everything to my bag and looked him dead in the eye. The men you owe, the ones who threatened your sister have been paid. They won't come back. His eyes widened slightly. I cut him off. That was for Rachel, not for you. And don't think for 1 second it buys you anything. I turned to Rebecca. You ready? She nodded. Quiet. As we walked to the door, Ethan called out. What am I supposed to do now? I paused, my hand on the doorknob. Live with what you've done. We stepped out into the night, the cool breeze of early spring brushing against our skin like absolution. As we walked down the drive, past the grandiose fountain Ethan insisted we install, I glanced up at the house one final time. It no longer felt like home. It felt like a crime scene. You okay? Rebecca asked softly beside me. I smiled faintly. I will be. The car was waiting at the curb. I climbed in, setting the envelope in my lap like a sealed chapter. As we pulled away, I reached for the charm bracelet Lucille had given me. The metal was warm from my skin, a quiet promise of strength. Ethan had tried to destroy me, but he had only revealed. We stood in comfortable silence, as the last light faded from the sky, and I felt something I hadn't known in years. Peace, not the hollow calm I used to manufacture to survive, but the real kind, the kind that comes from wholeness, from truth. Sophia took a seat beside me, tucking her feet beneath her as the waves whispered to the shore. My painting, the woman walking away from shattered glass, still caught the sun's final rays, the deep hues of orange and crimson making it glow like fire frozen in motion. You know, she said gently, this life you've built here, it's rare. Most people never leave the fire, they stay even as it burns them. I stayed too long, I admitted, but I'm not angry at the woman who stayed. She thought she was doing the right thing, and the woman, I smiled faintly, knows better, and paints it. Sophia laughed softly. That's the kind of wisdom that makes art timeless. In the distance, laughter from the beach floated up with the breeze. Tourists, locals, children, life, continuing. And for the first time in so long, I felt like I wasn't just watching from behind glass. I was part of it. Vivian Hartley, the woman who had once vanished, was alive in every brushstroke of her new canvas. The gallery showing was just days away. Miguel had promised to stand in the front row. Sophia had already prepared a celebratory dinner. I'd received messages from collectors across Europe, asking to purchase the full collection before it was even unveiled. But the most valuable thing I'd gained couldn't be sold or shown. It was the knowing of who I was now, of who I had become. Rebecca's bookstore in Colorado was thriving. Her voice sounded lighter every time we spoke. She'd sent a photo last week of her standing in front of the shop with a handmade sign, "New chapter begins here." And it had. Amelia had flown in last month. She brought old photo albums, wine, and stories of our childhood I'd half forgotten. We sat on the beach and cried, not out of grief, but gratitude for still having each other. As for Ethan, I hadn't heard from him directly, but the headlines told me the FBI had quietly opened a full investigation. Wire fraud, insurance manipulation, offshore tax evasion. It hadn't made the front page, but it had made the financial section. His name was no longer associated with innovation or leadership, but with scandal. And I felt nothing, not victory, not satisfaction, just release. I looked out at the ocean. My ring finger still bore a faint tan line, but even that was fading now. My past no longer clung to me, it drifted out with the tide. You know what the strange thing is? I said to Sophia, lifting my glass again. I should thank him. She raised an eyebrow. Really? If I hadn't overheard him that night. I said I might have spent the rest of my life trying to be what he wanted. Instead I found out who I really am. Sophia clinked her glass to mine. To unexpected blessings, she said, and to bourbon left behind. I added. We laughed, the kind of deep, earned laughter that carries healing with it. And as the stars began to prick the darkening sky, I leaned back in my chair, exhaled and let it all go. Not just the betrayal, but the need to be anyone other than myself. Because sometimes the greatest revenge isn't making someone pay for what they've done. It's refusing to let what they've done define who you become. If this story gripped you as much as it gripped us, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more jaw-dropping true-style drama stories every week. Vivian's journey from betrayal to empowerment reminds us how strong a person can become when pushed to the edge. Would you have disappeared like her, or confronted him on the spot? Let us know in the comments. What would you do if you overheard your partner planning your death? Your thoughts might just be featured in our next video. Stick around, these stories only get deeper.